Hi, everyone. Good morning from Hong Kong. Welcome to today's event. My name is Vincent. I'm the founder of Inspect Element, a venture builder based in Hong Kong, and I will be your moderator for today. So Hong Kong has always been perceived as a key financial center globally, but I guess in the recent decade, Hong Kong is also getting huge growth in terms of the technology space and attracted homegrown or foreign startups to operate in Hong Kong. So the growth is definitely there. So in terms of funding amount, it has grown, from 8 times from 2014 to 2019, and today we have over 18 unicorns headquartered in Hong Kong. So I guess today we're here to discuss how do we as founders or startup to tap into this opportunity. So we're going to deep dive into the current startup scene in Hong Kong. So I guess most importantly is, what are the market opportunities and landscape in Hong Kong? How do we actually expand to Hong Kong? And then another thing is how do we actually navigate the talent pool in Hong Kong for a startup? And what are some potential challenges that as founder you may face into expanding in Hong Kong? And again, I guess last but not least is some case studies that our speakers is going to share with you guys. When you expand to Hong Kong. So in our panel today, we have three very experienced speakers that will cover today's topic from different perspectives, from global trend, local deep dive, to from a founder perspective. So first, let's welcome Charles Ferguson, APAC General Manager at Globalization Partners. Hello, Charles.
Hey, good morning from Narita Airport. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us in the airport.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Kao Ping, co-founder and executive director at Wellbeing Digital. Hello, Kao Ping.
Hey, good morning. Hello, everybody. Hello from Hong Kong.
Hi. And last but not least, we have Wendy Chow, Head of Innovation and Communications Technology at Invest Hong Kong.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Thanks a lot for the speakers for joining today. So as a reminder, we do have a Q&A sections at the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type into the chat room in Zoom, and then we'll get back to you later on at the end of the sharing. So let's go deep dive into the topic. So I guess the biggest question for today's panel is why is Hong Kong a good destination for startup expansion? So I guess for founders, one big question is what is next? For Charles, as an expert covering the whole APAC area, so Charles, what do you think, why Hong Kong is a potential place for, a destination for expansion?
Look, it's a reasonable question to ask, and particularly right now as the global economy is facing a lot of turbulence, a lot of headwinds. There are both challenges and opportunities to expanding business in this environment. Hong Kong is uniquely positioned to take advantage of a whole host of characteristics that set it apart as a very unique location. I would suggest that the market size itself it's not maybe as large as, for example, where I am today in Japan or in Korea, where I was last week. It's a very attainable market with a very attractive market size, about 7.4 million people. It's actually larger than the Singapore market. And there's a lot of really interesting correlation between those two markets because they act as hubs for attraction of investment, for attraction of talent, and for attraction of infrastructure. The strategic location gives it a really unique perspective on the mainland market, but also Northeast Asia, broadly speaking. And by virtue of the fact that for decades and decades, Hong Kong has been world renowned as a sort of a beacon around financial stability, but also as a financial center for the entire globe. So when people think about markets, where to go and gather up capital, potentially even provide an initial public offering to the marketplace, there's a lot of focus on Hong Kong as a very friendly environment for raising capital and for exploring life as a public company, if you will. And lastly, I would suggest to you that indeed it is the case that Hong Kong is, decades long been recognized as one of the freest economies and one of the easiest places in the entire world to actually set up business and get your infrastructure in place. There are challenges, and we're going to discuss that through the course of the conversation. But I hasten to add that there is not a single market on earth where there isn't a challenge with an equal opportunity. So you can't get free lunch. You got to work for it. But it's a brilliant marketplace, and particularly for startups right now, there's a host of opportunities to tap into talent, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well.
Got it. Got it. Thanks, Charles. So I guess the follow-up for Wendy is like for Invest Hong Kong, Invest Hong Kong has definitely helped lots of foreign companies to expand to Hong Kong. So, could you share some insight, especially to the foreign founders joining today? Like, what are some market opportunities in Hong Kong? And then, I guess more importantly is like, what are some advice that you would give, for companies that is considering to expand to Hong Kong?
I mean, to start with, Hong Kong is very much an international business hub. So the market opportunities that they offer very much align with the global trend. So if I try to sort of describe it in very broad term, I think if you have a solution that can help companies to go through their digital transformation journey, or it is related to sort of making an impact to build up a smart city, then Hong Kong is the place where you should think about. And then I think, well, secondly, about the market opportunities, Hong Kong is an international financial hub. So I think the FSI, they're always, relatively speaking, they're the big spender, okay? So they've got the money and also they're very much, willing to invest in technology because they have to compete or sort of stay competitive with their own other market players. Now, for example, if I just try to quote one of the survey. Now, according to a survey undertaken by Hong Kong Monetary Authority last October, 71% of the FSI, the firms in Hong Kong, across the FSI sector, they have either adopted or they are planning to adopt AI or big data technologies. So for the banks, I have come across different clients. Now they get contract from the banks, maybe try to help them with enhancing their infrastructure or providing them with solutions to enhance customer experience. I think customer CX is very much like a buzzword this day. For the banks or for the insurance companies, they have to really invest a lot of money in order to enhance the customer experience. To quote another example, like Hong Kong has issued, I think, well, among one of the first economies to issue virtual bank license and also virtual insurance license as well. So one of the virtual bank is a. Now what they do is that they try to come up with mobile games. They call it gamification to enhance customer experience. So I think as long as you are very smart and then you can provide something can help the FSI companies to enhance the customer experience or help them to enhance their productivity. Here is the market.
Got it. So I guess for Kao Ping, right? Like Kao Ping is definitely a founder and have experience expanding into Hong Kong. So Kao Ping, could you share, your rationale back then and on why Hong Kong is the place for you to expand? And then as a founder, like what are some tips that you would share with the peer founders in in the audience today?
So we are in the healthcare med segment. So as a startup company doing innovation in this area, R&D definitely is very important. Comparatively, Hong Kong in amongst Asia, we have some of the best universities as well in the top 10. I would even say on par with, for example, Singapore. So R&D is certainly something that has been pretty strong in Hong Kong. At the same time, for a startup, we cannot just rely on R&D. We need commercialization. So I think as the recent development in this region, I guess the audience may have of Greater Bay Area. It's a population of more than 100 million people. So Greater Bay Area, specifically, for example, Shenzhen, Shenzhen right across the city, right across the river from Hong Kong has about 20 million people, more than double of Hong Kong. It is a manufacturing hub. It is a place where you can get your devices, your gadgets made up. So in essence, Hong Kong and as well as the Greater Bay Area that is part of represents not only R&D, but opportunities for commercialization, opportunities for prototyping and manufacturing. So it's an ecosystem by itself that you can subsequently use as a springboard to go beyond this area into Asia or even to the world.
Got it. Kao Ping, you mentioned a point about GBA, right? Like just now, like Charles and Wendy have shared, for example, the trend, the capitalization, and other areas. But you mentioned about GBA. Do you mind share a bit more to the audience, who may not be hearing of this term, and then what are opportunities in GBA in general?
Okay, so GBA stands for Greater Bay Area in Mandarin Dawanji. So it represents 9 cities in the Guangdong province, Shenzhen, Huizhou, Foshan, and then it's called 9+2 because 9 is on the mainland and 2 outside of the mainland. One is Macau, one is Hong Kong. So together it represents the size of population as the consumer market. And at the same time, in recent years, there have been many initiatives that has started. For example, our office is based in Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. Hong Kong Science Park also have some projects ongoing by the river. They call it He Tao, where the collaboration between the Shenzhen government and the Hong Kong government. So in that sense, in the past, we go into Shenzhen or go into Dongguan for say manufacturing, but now in order to facilitate engineers to work easier, so therefore there's this opportunities that have been set up, initiative that has been put forth, grants, for instance, to attract Hong Kong company to both have base in Hong Kong as well as a certain city in Shenzhen. For instance, our company, we also have a branch over in Shenzhen as well. So yes, so we are experiencing all these opportunities in the Greater Bay Area, talk the same language, see the same kind of Chinese characters.
Got it.
Traditional. Yeah.
Got it. That's definitely very exciting. So Wendy, like I guess about this GBA topic, right? Is it common for you to see foreign companies when they expand into Hong Kong, GBA is also part of the scope, or what are some trends that you see for foreign companies expanding into Hong Kong, and how do they consider GBA in general?
So to start with, I mean, just like Charles shared with us, Hong Kong actually our market is very small. We're talking about around 7.5 million people. But then one of the reasons why so many companies, whether they are the big one or the startup, they come to Hong Kong to set up is not for the Hong Kong market. It's more for expanding into the region, including mainland China. But mainland China, it is a huge market. Okay, I don't think every company has to sort of address 1.4 billion people market. Just the GBA alone is over 80 million. It's already a huge market. And then, I mean, just for example, I remember that Alibaba and Deloitte, they conducted a survey. They released the result of a survey, and then they interviewed the startup. And then they found that actually 63% of the startup, they expressed the view that within 3 years, it is the plan that they will expand into the GBA, the Greater Bay Area. So I think this is very much like people are very much getting themselves prepared to get into this very promising market. But of course, they have to do the planning. That's why they say that within the coming 3 years, you have to do your homework. Whichever market you are targeting, you have to do your due diligence in order to be successful.
Got it. One quick follow-up on here, like I guess all the founders will be interested to know, like when we're talking about, for example, homework, when we want to expand your GBA, like do you have some suggestions or some idea, like what kind of stuff that founders actually have to prepare when they want to get into GBA as an example?
Now, first of all, you have to be aware that just like Charles mentioned, Hong Kong is a very free economy. So that's why it's very open to companies from all over the world to set up here. So there's almost no barrier. So as your solution is good and you have hired the right talent, then you can get into the market. But when you cross the border into the mainland, it is a different sort of a region in terms of the law system, the regulatory environment, and so on. So you have to do your due diligence in the sense that you really have to get, a good feel of what it is like. But I think at the same time, there are many people in Hong Kong, they have already gone through that journey. So you can tap on the experience, and also, for example, like our office, we are also set up a GBA team in order to help companies would initially set up in Hong Kong. Ultimately, they want to get into the GBA. So we set up this team dedicated to provide that kind of services, to provide them with the relevant information or get them connected with the relevant government body across the border.
Got it. Got it. Just now, we mentioned a bit about talent, right? Like in Hong Kong or in GBA. So I guess we definitely covered that Hong Kong is a good location for expansion. But I guess like when they actually expand, then talent will be, the topic to discuss, right? Like how do you actually set up in Hong Kong? What kind of talents we're looking for. So I guess a question to Charles is like, how will you describe the talent pool in Hong Kong or in GBA, and what kind of talents are there, like for startups to hire?
Yeah, look, it's a very important part of the due diligence process that Wendy just mentioned. By virtue of the fact that the population is relatively small compared to other places in the region, the Hong Kong talent pool is it's precious, right? So there is a high concentration of related talent acumen specific to the financial services industry. But when you think about that, don't just immediately go to gray suits and blue ties and think only about the banking industry as the progenitor of that talent pool. There are a host of very complementary verticals around the banking and financial services industry that provide additional sorts of talent. However, those talents are in very high demand. So when you think about that, there are two opportunities in this instance. The first opportunity is that if you're a startup founder or a technology company that is primarily driven by providing services or solutions that focus in on digital transformation or robotic process automation or artificial intelligence technologies of this nature, if you think about how a lot of the infrastructure in Hong Kong today is seeking out these types of solutions and thus seeking out talent to deliver these solutions in the larger businesses, you then therefore would see a direct correlation to an opportunity to bring your technologies into this market and really help them on this journey of transformation, which every industry, not just in Hong Kong, but all across the region, are hungry for. The second opportunity I would suggest is that, as Wendy and Kaoping pointed out, there's a real value in the inherent stability of the fundamentals that exist in Hong Kong as a marketplace. So think about this. You've actually got the best of both worlds. You've got an incredibly stable economy with strong rule of law and ease of doing business and international access from an infrastructure point of view. Might have a limited talent base internally, but however, you are, by virtue of being part of this greater Bay Area that we were just discussing a moment ago, plugged into a talent base that's equally sort of modernized and well educated and internationally focused and ambitious, that is 10 times the size of the population of Hong Kong. You're talking about a population of 5 million people plugged into this massive additional pool of 7.4 million, 71 million people, right? And when you think about that in context, what's really cool and quite interesting is that if you're familiar with there's a recruitment agency that's around the world called Robert Walters, and they did an employment survey just this year where 78% of the respondents said that one of their primary benefits that they were looking for in terms of whom they would work for is a company that provides remote work options. So what does that mean? That means that if you set up in Hong Kong, you don't have to have all your talent in Hong Kong. You can hire talent all over the place because people want it. So that's a huge opportunity to leverage amazing infrastructure, but tap into an unlimited talent base.
Got it. Got it. I think one great point that you mentioned is on the remote work, and the company doesn't necessarily have to set up offices in all the cities, but they can actually have this remote work process. I guess, but for the audience, especially some founders in the West or in SCA, like one question that they might ask is, talents in Hong Kong and in GBA per se, like do they actually could adopt or can work smoothly with, for example, native English speaking countries or in the Western side. Like from your experience, like do you see it's easy for them to actually get along well, or there are some points that as a founder or as a manager need to address this topic?
Yeah, look, I mean the theme, the recurring theme, particularly over the past 36 months, has been the theme of culture. right? And how does one, regardless of company size or regardless of location, ensure that when we have workers that are not, in different types of talent that aren't in our back door, how do we ensure that they're integrated into our ethos and into our value systems and that they work really well together? That's kind of one aspect of culture. The other aspect of culture is, nationality and linguistics and sort of working norms and these types of things. My suggestion to the founders would be two parts. Number one, I would suggest that you would want to ascertain across your landscape of all the various sort of mechanisms in your business of how you do work. And you would need to categorize the work to be done in sort of three key categories. The first one being, what are jobs that need to be done that simply cannot be put away? They need to be inside, my office. I need to be next to them. They're physical types of jobs that require proximity. That's category one. The second category is, what are jobs or tasks or processes that I could potentially automate and just remove the need to have, physical workers attend to these types of things through software. And the third aspect there is, what are some jobs that I could do that don't necessarily require for me to have the person within line of sight? I can have this person anywhere in the world. When you discern those three categories, the next step is to sit down and really understand what your values are as a company, what your mission is, and what your vision is. And then you design the job descriptions that correlate to those values, mission, and vision. And with those job descriptions being properly designed and the job sort of search being focused on things that could be done abroad, then you're finding people that, okay, there could be some language challenges and you need to sort of qualify for that. But outside of that, the culture becomes less about location and nationality and geography and more about, does this person have the type of competencies and sort of affinity to be successful in my company's environment? And that's agnostic to location. Talent should be borderless, so long as Wendy said you properly prepare and do the right level of planning. I hate to say this cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. And that 5 Ps applies to every single aspect of your work.
Got it. Really interesting. So I guess the question to Wendy, given you are based in Hong Kong, is you definitely have seen startup expanding in Hong Kong and hire local talents or even GBA talents. What are some tips that you would give to the founders when they want to hire locally in Hong Kong?
Well, I think first of all, it is a challenge. I think going after the talent is a global challenge. It is not confined to Hong Kong. So the challenge would be to attract, and then more importantly is to retain the talent. Now, I just echo Charles highlighting the importance of culture, but in a different context. I think especially for the startup, usually the employees would be young. For the young people, I think you can talk about mission and vision, but sometimes actually culture can be more important than your so-called mission and vision. So for the young people, the young talent, they're attracted to your company because they like your culture and they also love to be part of something that they think is important. I just visited a company in Science Park yesterday, and then they are engaged with doing something that is about sustainability to make to offer services that can help sort of reduce carbon emission. Now, they share with us that now if you try to go after engineers and then the talent pool, it is very limited, IT and so on. And the banks have already grabbed a lot of them because they can offer higher pay. So how do they recruit talent? They share with us that now for the young people, some of them actually they recruited some of them fresh graduates who don't have a degree in computer science or in engineering, no, nothing. But then they love the work they are going to do is that they are going to make this a better world. And then, so as you can identify some team leaders to lead this group of young people, very young, talented, have no background in technology, but have got a passion for it. And then you give them coaching and they can catch up very fast. So do not just look around to say that, well, I'm in computer science. I must look for somebody who has got a technical background. These days, even if we talk about coding, it is not as a challenge or as complicated as, let's say, 20 years ago. So the young people, they are very, very talented and can catch up very, very fast. So as you give them a culture where they can grow, where they can identify with what you're doing, and you empower them, and then I think you can develop a team.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Cao Ping, you just mentioned that you hire both in Hong Kong and even in GBA. Like, can you share more experience, like how the process is like, some of your personal experience in that?
Yeah. So first of all, there's no longer the type of permanent job setting like our fathers or grandfather. The key thing is in the company that you run, whether it can be a platform or even a springboard for your colleagues to go to the next destination, how you can enable them grow and add value to themselves. Hong Kong, like many other countries or regions, we have our everybody's fighting for the talent, obviously. But the uniqueness in Hong Kong, there are a few areas. Number one, for instance, a couple years ago, I understood that about 70 or 80% of master's students in the universities of Hong Kong, there are about 8 to 10 tertiary institutions in Hong Kong, are from mainland. And one of the advantage of staying in Hong Kong for 7 years is after 7 years, you get a Hong Kong ID, like myself, right? And from there, you can either stay and, since Hong Kong is part of China, so there's people want to stay here, or it can be a springboard, to another location. At the same time, we also noticed that in the last at least the last couple 1-2 years, due to COVID, due to economies in the Western countries are not necessarily doing as well as before. So we have also managed to attract returnees, Hong Kong people coming back to Hong Kong to look for their next step in their career. Obviously, we also have people who want to use Hong Kong as a stepping stone before they go into China and explore, because I think right now, if you look at the whole world, definitely the Chinese economy is one that is still growing. There are other economies that are not necessarily enjoying that kind of level of growth. The Hong Kong government itself is definitely not kind of stepping back. There have been many programs, initiatives executed. For instance, there's a research talent hub, RTH, by the Hong Kong government, where they subsidize a great percentage of salaries if you can get the master's or PhD, of which once we hired someone actually from Taiwan, and actually Invest Hong Kong help us to secure the visa, work visa, and so on and so forth. So Invest Hong Kong actually helped us on there. Other programs that have been initiated recently include, for instance, the Hong Kong Jockey Club and Hong Kong Science Park collaborated on a Procrucy program that hire not necessarily technology talents. There's a technology leader of tomorrow program. So all these programs subsidizes a certain percentage of salaries ranging from a few months up to a year. And in this aspect, Hong Kong government has been very pragmatic and supportive in helping us do that. So in summary, I think over in Hong Kong, we managed to either get Hong Kong people to come back to Hong Kong to work. We have one new colleague coming back next month, or attract mainland Chinese students who study here and want to stay longer in order to get their Hong Kong ID. We attract people who want to use Hong Kong as a stepping stone and go into mainland China. So actually, and then the language is pretty much the same, Chinese, so to speak. Of course, we use multilingual Chinese, Cantonese, English. Everything's multilingual. So yeah, so we were able to attract. In fact, we also managed to hire people from India as well. So yeah, and the food obviously caters to many different cultures.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Cool. I think just now we kind of covered, Hong Kong is potentially a very good location for expansion, and the talent is definitely there. But as what Charles mentioned just now, like there's definitely some challenges that startup will face as well when they expand. So I guess maybe first to Charles, like in your experience, like what are some common challenges that SAP will face when they expand into Hong Kong or GBA per se?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this probably in every forum that I speak in, but I'll repeat myself just to be, on the record, that every market on the planet has challenges. So, it's not unique, particularly to one over another that has, a particular concentration in one area or another with respect to tough stuff to try to deal with. Some areas that Hong Kong does grapple with, as well as some of the other markets in the region. If you're coming in from overseas and you have sort of done desktop research about regulations in terms of getting set up in the market, how to employ labor compliantly, the regimes around tax, it pays dividends for you to do one of two things: either explore a partner in the market who can give you current advice, or hire someone locally who is familiar with the landscape to help you to navigate so that you don't make any mistakes. That it's certainly the case that comparatively, even to other parts of the Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong is far more transparent and more simple to navigate. However, that doesn't mean that you should just throw caution to the wind and just fly into Hong Kong and set up a business. You have to be cautious and very informed. The tax laws and regulations are relatively business friendly, and it's very well known that Hong Kong is a great place for doing business. But you have to submit, as an example, annual audited financial statements to the Inland Revenue Department. You need to ensure that you're paying the proper levels of corporate tax and payroll taxes. You need to ensure that you're submitting the appropriate allocations to the social benefit schemas, like the Provident Fund, the Managed Provident Fund that's there. There are a whole host of tax requirements that you need to understand. And if you don't get those right, you can fall afoul of the law and have some very significant repercussions from that. Indeed, it's the case that over the past couple of years as well, the landscape, the political landscape, the economic landscape, the whole sort of makeup of the way that Hong Kong manages their compliance frameworks has evolved. It has changed. And so if you hear stories from expats that lived in Hong Kong in the early 2000s, well, that's not the same Hong Kong that it is today. It's like every place in the world is changed because of the pandemic. It's changing because it's maturing. China mainland is putting new processes and new sorts of infrastructure in place into the Hong Kong marketplace. So you have to be aware of these things. You have to navigate them so that you can be sure that you're doing what's appropriate and not what's historical. There is a lot of well-documented information about the cost of living in Hong Kong. You can find inexpensive places to live, and you can find inexpensive sort of options, but typically speaking, particularly with respect to labor costs, it can be intensive compared to some other markets. So you need to bear that in mind. It goes back to the point I mentioned earlier, which is what jobs need to be done perhaps in that market versus in other markets in terms of accessing talent, et cetera. And the last one I'd bring up would be it is, because of its intensity and concentration in financial services, particularly, there is a very rigorous process by which you must comply in order to open up a bank account. And lots of startups, lots of small, medium enterprises really labor under the process of actually setting up your banking infrastructure. It takes quite a bit of time. So, not to plug, but I would suggest you need to look at sort of doing things in parallel. So I would suggest, as an example, putting someone on the ground in Hong Kong, getting into market as quickly as you can. And then while you're doing that, while you have someone in market, go through the process of setting up your business and setting up your banking and infrastructure, et cetera. Using an employer of record model would be a great way to do that. But there are a whole host of different routes to doing things in parallel so that the time doesn't impact your ability to do business in Hong Kong.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Charles. It's really good insight. So Wendy, like you have also seen lots of startups expanding into Hong Kong. Like what are some challenges that you have seen, for startups that try or have expanded into Hong Kong?
I think to start with, what makes Hong Kong a very sort of unique place for startup to set up is that we are a very free economy, which means that anybody can sort of come in and set up their own company. If you look at every year Invest Hong Kong, we conducted a survey to have an updated view of the startup scenario in Hong Kong. And then for the latest one, according to the 2021 statistic, now actually 28% of the startup setting up in Hong Kong, their founders are coming from outside of Hong Kong. So they're not local, okay, 28%. And then out of this 28%, the top 5 economies where they come from would be number 1 is mainland China, and then US, UK, France, and India. So what I'm trying to suggest or imply is that the competition over here is really very fierce because it is free. So anyone with good technology, they can get in. And then no one will protect you from your competitor at all. So you really have to be doing very, very well that you can sort of survive before you thrive in this city. But we have seen that, but the good thing is that if you can do well in Hong Kong, I think you can do well in many other cities because you have already sort of, overcome the challenge of competing with someone who is from local, someone who is from abroad, and you can still do business. So I think you are already sort of certified or qualified. So getting the business is the major challenge. I would say that after getting your people, you have to get the business in order to continue to grow. So getting the business, that's why I always emphasize or share with my client that you've got to do your homework. There are huge opportunities here, but at the same time, there is also very fierce competition. You compete with those from mainland China, compete with those homegrown startup. The latest survey is that we've got more than 3,700 startups in our city, and 28% of them, the founders are from outside of Hong Kong. You have to compete with all these very bright talent. So make sure that you've got very good solution. And then your solution can fit into what the market is asking for. Then you have a much better chance of being successful. And also try to leverage on what Hong Kong offers to you. Now, this is a tiny, densely populated city. And then the advantage is that you can get around and get to know those people you need to know within a very short period of time. You know A, and then you will get connected with that circle. It is a very small community, and most people are very open to collaborate, to get to know you, to see what we can do together, tap on one and other's resources. So I think that is another advantages of Hong Kong.
Got it. Hong Kong is very, very, very competitive. So I guess, the next question to Kao Ping is like, how as a founder, like what is the best survival tips? Like, what challenge they must face as a founder and how to survive?
I think the key thing is if you come to Hong Kong, it is important to get yourself into for example, whether it's a Hong Kong Science and Technology Park or the Cyberport. These are set up for networking session. I believe that entrepreneurs everywhere, we need to network. You cannot gone are the days where you think you put something great and just keep it close to your chest and hope everybody knows about it. I think that's not going to happen. So in essence, you gotta, when you come to Hong Kong, leverage on a lot of associations. There are, for instance, in Science Park, there is a startup association, startup alumni association. There's a TIN, the Innovator Network, whether it's formal or informal social group. I'm sure it's kind of similar in Singapore as well, or other parts of the world. So you need to leverage on that. As mentioned, the Hong Kong government has definitely set up a lot of grants. I think specifically for grants or support, increasingly they are not just for R&D. So used to be you come to Hong Kong, the ITF, Innovation Technology Fund, they will sponsor you, not sponsor, but they will give $50 for dollar matching for R&D effort that you do here on projects that have been approved. But I think in recent years, the government definitely realized that you have to commercialize it. In Chinese speak, it's 落地, okay, to literally on the ground. You can't be doing R&D up in the air and it doesn't get commercialized. So along that line, there have been quite a few fundings. For instance, we have taken advantage of this called a BUD fund, the Brand Upgrading and Domestic Sale Fund, which help Hong Kong companies commercialize your product in places like ASEAN, Japan, mainland China, quite a few countries in Europe. We also participated and we have taken advantage of a public sector trial scheme, which is a superb scheme where they reimburse you up to $1 million Hong Kong dollar. And they also along the line help assist a startup in looking for a NGO to utilize or to trial. That's why it's called a public sector trial scheme, to try out the R&D work that you have done. Because a lot of time you may have R&D and then you try to look for investor and they ask you, so have you commercialized? Who's using it? And you go, go through this public sector trial scheme, PSTS. That's also allow you to not only give you money, so to speak, but of course you have to pay first. At the same time, look for collaborators with you to try out. Last November, we won an innovation award in the inaugural Hong Kong CTI and Grand Challenge, which also very surprisingly, the first time we got 800,000 Hong Kong dollars to actually commercialize the concept, innovation concept that we have pitched and won the innovation award. So, for instance, given that we also have a joint venture in Singapore, comparing some of these grants or programs, I think in recent 2 years, Hong Kong government have definitely noticed that you realize that you cannot just rely on property or finance. You need to go, versatile, and from that perspective, help us not just for R&D but for commercialization. So all these are very good initiatives that. But in order to know how to get it or what to get, or you need to ideally tag into, for instance, Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, where we are based. You need to be part of a network, whether formal or informal, and learn from other people. I guess that's the homework also that Wendy mentions. Besides looking for Invest Hong Kong to help you, like we did to get visa for our. A couple of years ago, before COVID, we actually also got intern from Singapore, and to come here, work here for 6 months, and we even got work visa for that as well. So work visa is not too difficult to get, as long as you can prove that why you need, because the whole world is going after talents.
Got it. Congratulations on winning the City R&D challenge.
Oh, thanks.
Right. I guess before we enter Q&A, the last part that I think the audience will definitely want to hear more are some case studies. So we talk about how good the city is for expansion, the GBA market, the talent pool. So maybe we can start with Cao Ping. Like have you heard any case studies or references of how outside startups actually expand to Hong Kong?
Actually, in the science park, yes, like what Wendy mentioned, in fact, in all of Hong Kong, you get founders from all over the place. The founders from big countries, whether it's on the mainland or whether it's the US, Europe, because of the competition there, people tend to be very hungry, and you can actually learn from each other. You have talents from all over the place, whether they came here to study or whether they came originally working for a big corporation and decide to stay longer. All these are, you have a lot of those, for example, that subsequently went to fintech, for instance. So all these represents talent. And of course, there's a big group of mainlanders who come here to study and subsequently stay in Hong Kong. So how do you make use of them is something that the company that you work for, you just need to be very welcoming in that sense. It's a platform. Don't think of it as a company that people come to work for you for, retire here. That's not going to happen anymore, right? Of course, the biggest challenge right now, rather even acknowledged by the government, is housing. This is not something that a startup can fix. But definitely the government is aware of that, and there are initiatives to try to, So in the past, we also have colleagues who actually live in Shenzhen and come over to Hong Kong. But of course, it was pre-COVID, and hopefully in the next 6 months, it will open up, and then we can leverage that again.
Got it. Got it. So Wendy, like you have also seen so many startups, expanding in Hong Kong. Like any interesting stories or case studies you could share with the audience?
I really respect the startup because they are very agile and very passionate. So the case that I would like to share with you is that a company that we have worked with for many years. Now, I shared before that 28% of the startup, their founders are coming outside of Hong Kong. Another 7% of them are returnees from Hong Kong, which means that they were born in Hong Kong, but then later on they went abroad to study or to work and so on. So the story that I would like to share with the others would be a company called Mother App. Now, the founder was originally from Hong Kong, and then he went to Stanford to study, and then he worked in Google, and then he decided that, well, he would like to start his own company, and then he returned to Hong Kong. And he started his company, and then he moved into Science Park. And then they started as doing the website development, writing a lot of the apps and so on. And then later on, they see that, well, there is AI, big data, IoT coming along. And then at the same time, in parallel to their web development business, they started another business line. It is for the IoT, for the AI, machine learning, and so on. And then they got customers outside of Hong Kong, of course. I mean, they've got those enterprises, I mean, those manufacturing customers who are operating in GBA. They've got factories in GBA and so on. And then they applied their technology, the AI solution, to help them to increase their productivity. So that's why I really respect the startup, because I mean, they are so agile to seize the business opportunities. So they will keep doing what they're good at. At the same time, they will keep in view what's the upcoming opportunities, and then they would just, go into it, and they have been doing very well. So from a small company, now they've got operation in Hong Kong and also operation in the mainland. So they try to leverage on the talent pool in Hong Kong as well as in the mainland. And now they have grown to be a very sizable company. And we really enjoy traveling along with them this journey. And I hope that Invest Hong Kong has more chances to serve other startups who are, or other audience who are attending this webinar, that we can serve you, and then also to see how you can make a success story in Hong Kong. And then we can play, even if a very small part, it is our honor.
Got it. Got it. Invest Hong Kong is definitely a very good partner, to work with when expanding Hong Kong. I guess before we enter Q&A, is to Charles, like, is there any case or any final tips you give, to foreign founders, when they want to expand to Hong Kong?
I was actually at one point, while some folks were speaking on the panel, I was tapping some answers to a couple of questions I saw, and they all centered around examples of something that Wendy just stated as well. And I'm thinking back to some successful cases I've seen in the past where companies have, as we've all shared on this panel today, leveraged the unique position that Hong Kong enjoys from an infrastructure and rule of law point of view. And in addition, you're talking about decades of connectivity of Hong Kong into global trade. So when you think about that, when you look at this region particularly, there's a lot of cooperative economic partnership agreements that are in place that uniquely tie Hong Kong to some of the most important growth markets in the world, namely Southeast Asia, not just mainland China, which is unto itself a massive, huge opportunity, but using Hong Kong as a fulcrum, right? And your business and the markets you're serving as levers for growth. You can focus on mainland China, it's right there at your doorstep, but don't underestimate the fact that there's so much connectivity between the Hong Kong market and the Southeast Asian market, as an example. So there are companies, there's a company called Elmist, founded by a guy called Ken Zhang in 2014. And they founded themselves in Hong Kong. They used the Greater Bay Area to harness engineering horsepower and built essentially content delivery networks for gaming. But they pivoted over time when they realized they had a unique opportunity to optimize edge applications and networks in the 5G spectrum, focusing into Southeast Asia, and really began to tap on both sides of the equation, right? Content delivery in mainland China and engineering horsepower for talent point of view, and leveraging the connectivity of the Hong Kong market to Southeast Asia as well to bring new types of 5G technologies into play. And then, you know, again, showing the tenacity of a startup's general mentality and DNA, right? When COVID hit, of course, it impacted the business, but like any good startup founder, they pivoted and started to use the same levels of engineering, content delivery technology, and 5G prowess to deliver telemedicine applications, right? And all of this being done across the entirety of the Asia Pacific region from a small little startup based in Hong Kong, right? So you have to be creative, you have to be agile and open to change, because we're living in a completely crazy world right now that's constantly changing. You have to bend like the willow, right? But at the end of the day, if you go out with the agenda of ensuring that you're open to new opportunity, you're properly planning for the environment that you're going to expand in, and you keep your talent agenda as your primary priority, because the best product, the best PowerPoint, the best solution, the best intentions are useless if you don't have good talent. So look for partnerships, find alternative routes to get talent into market, and get to market as fast as you can, because now's the time.
Got it. Got it. It's a really great point. I guess, being agile and having good talents are definitely, key to a startup. Thanks again to Kao Ping, Wendy, and Charles. I think, the audience definitely, have a lot more understanding about Hong Kong, and then they have some very good questions that, want to, ask, the panel. I guess some of them are already addressed in the Q&A, so I'll just go through those items that are not being covered yet. So I guess the first one is very tactical. Like, from Dr. Andy, does Hong Kong government provide any special visas for startup or temporary residents, for startups from abroad? So see if maybe Wendy or Charles, you have the knowledge about visa items.
I think we do have the TETRAS. It's called the TETRAS scheme, where companies can sort of recruit talent from abroad, and then it go for a faster track. But in general, actually, I think our immigration department is very business friendly, in the sense that we know that we need talent, especially in the technology arena. So another thing is that if you really plan to set up in Hong Kong, and then you are concerned about the work, or you have questions about work visa application, to get in touch with Invest Hong Kong, because it is also part of our sort of responsibility or our services to help you to settle down or get into Hong Kong smoother. So we can also discuss with you about the work visa application, which visa is a better fit for you, and then also to sort of interact with the immigration department if necessary, to sort of accelerate or make the whole journey smoother, because we want you to feel welcome.
Got it. Got it. Charles also shares some very useful links. I think the audience should definitely bookmark it. Or Kao Ping as well on some schemes that founders could actually leverage on. I guess the next question is about industry specifics. So are there any certain industry that go really fast right now in Hong Kong or GBA, and what can we learn from it?
Well, probably I share with you statistics, okay, instead of observation. Now, according to, I mentioned about this survey that we undertake every year to get an update of the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong. Now, according to the 2021 survey, now out of the 3,700 plus startups in Hong Kong, 472 of them fall under fintech. And then the second one is e-commerce supply chain management, so 432. And number 3 is the professional or consultancy services. Number 4 is information, computer, and technology. And then number 5 is design. So all this information is sort of very transparent. Now, I think for any startup which is attending today's webinar, I will strongly recommend you to visit our Start Me Up website, because Invest Hong Kong, we are government department, and our website may not look as sort of dynamic, as energetic as the startup would like. So we built a separate website for the startup. And then we've got a lot of the startup resources that you can tap on, including the funding scheme, the Hong Kong government co-workspace, and then event and so on that you can tap on. So we will try to share the information, the website with everybody after the event. It's called Start Me Up Hong Kong.
Got it. I just shared the link for Start Me Up. In fact, they are very useful in terms of understanding, for example, what incubator in Hong Kong, what the programs in there. So I guess a last question that I see in here, which maybe Kao Ping could share more insight on, like what are some technology tools that startup could leverage on when they try to expand or try to grow?
Can you repeat again? What are some of the technology?
Some of the tools that startup could leverage on when they're expanding.
Okay. First, I'd like to address a little bit on what Wendy said about the visa.
Oh, sure.
I think the example Wendy mentioned is perhaps more tuned towards if you are really in Hong Kong and you want to hire foreign talent. But for startup founders who are from overseas and you want to go to Hong Kong, you are in a situation where, for instance, technically you come on a tourist visa and then you cannot work. But if you cannot work, you can't get the funding, you cannot do your startup, and you cannot do your startup, then you cannot apply a work visa for yourself. So that's kind of like a 22 situation, which I actually encountered like 22 years ago. I came in as a tourist visa, and then had to look for funding VCs. Subsequently, we got the funding from VCs, and then the company have to then hire me, and then went around back to the immigration department, and basically they're very pragmatic. And if it works for me 22 years ago, I'm sure today people are more pragmatic, given that they are also not living under a rock. They're also well aware that everybody is going after talent. So if you can, as a founder, if you have certain skills, a niche that you can illustrate, and then subsequently set up a company here, and then use their own company to hire yourself. Used to be, of course, the simple part is we have to leave Hong Kong, for example, go to Shenzhen, go to Macau, come back. But these days it's a little bit tough. But I'm sure in the next few months, the quarantine Hong Kong should be removed. Probably in the next 6 months or so, and then they'll be back to business as usual. To answer your question about tools, yeah, certainly the links I listed there, those are schemes or science park that we ourselves have used. We know it works. These are tools, and a lot of times, if you come to as a startup founder, I mentioned earlier, you need to network. So even if you join Hong Kong Science Park or Cyberport, for that matter, don't just hide in your office, or if you have an office in Wan Chai or Gong or Fortan, and then you just hide there and do your R&D. You always have to network. And from there, because as Wendy mentioned, the expanse of industries that the startups are in is pretty big. So the tool that works for me may not be the tool that works for you. And so from that perspective, definitely network in the group, and people are it's very free economy, very open. And so from that perspective, I've seen people willing to share. But of course, you need to contribute to the group first, for instance, and then subsequently you can also get things back. So I encourage you to look up, bookmark those links that have been shared on the chat.
Got it. Thanks again, Kao Ping, Wendy. And sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
I want to add on one point to elaborate on what Kao has shared with you. For the founders who would like to start a company in Hong Kong, basically now we've got the work visa, but within the work visa, actually there are two sort of category. One is a work visa that you are an employee. The other is called investment visa, but in reality, it is a work visa. It is for the founder. So you hold the shares of the company. Then you can go through this category. And as I mentioned before, if you have any queries and you want any assistance, just reach out to Invest Hong Kong. Yeah, and we have offices around the world, but you can just, send in your inquiry, or you can just drop me an email, and we will definitely get back to you and support your journey to start your exciting venture in Hong Kong.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Thanks again, Kaoping, Wendy, and Charles for the sharing. I guess today we kind of covered, Hong Kong is definitely a very exciting, city to expand, and then the correlation with GBA is definitely something that us founders have to, aware of. And then, there are different challenges, but as founders, the speakers also mentioned, the core is stay agile, networking around Hong Kong, and also make sure that you have enough talents. So remember to bookmark the links that the speakers have shared, and then if you have any questions, Invest Hong Kong is always the friend that you can reach out to. Thanks again for joining today, and hopefully we can see you again in the next event. All right, bye bye.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Safe travels. Be well.